please. And the video is on? Great. Good morning. Welcome everyone. Well done for getting here. Last day in the morning. So let's start with a few words. Sadasiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. And all we did there is give thanks to the lineage where this knowledge has been passed down for thousands of years, and in the middle there was Shankara, who gave the commentaries that allow us to follow it today, and down through all my teachers to myself at this point, so that I'm able to relay this message to you. So it's just giving thanks and asking for their grace to be with us during this talk. And right now on the third day, I need all the grace I can get. My eyes may be open, but I can assure you my brain is properly fried. So it'll be wonderful to at least sit down for a little while with yourselves. Some of you may have been with me yesterday when we tackled this very large question of what is consciousness. And we talked along the subject and came to the conclusion that consciousness is that by which our thoughts and actions are known. That is consciousness, that by which. And because this consciousness is the ultimate subject, it is the ultimate, is not even the knower, it is that by which the knowing is known. It is the ultimate subject. It is not the object. And we said that any experience is an object, and you are not the experience, you're the experiencer. The other thing we said is that consciousness has no size because it has no limit. It is an infinite thing without an edge. And something that is infinite without an edge has no capability of change. Something that's very difficult to understand. What do you mean that something never changes? In order for something to change, it must have an edge, because at that edge it stops being something, and from that border it becomes something else. If something is infinite and it has no end, then it's incapable of change. Yet here we are, and we're changing all the time. Throughout our lives, we change. In Vedanta, they talk about the 6 stages of growth. And when we list these 6 stages, you think, oh, that must start with birth. No. Vedanta says, for something cannot be just appearing. It must come from something else. And therefore, something must exist in a pre-manifest form in order to be manifested. So the first stages of growth is not birth, but is the first precondition for birth to take place. It's an unmanifested form. What does that mean? It means that an acorn is an unmanifested oak tree. Everything within the acorn is there to create an oak tree. But you slice an acorn and you'll not find the oak tree. And from a pear seed you'll get a pear tree. So all of us exist from this pre-unmanifested condition from which we are created. And the way that they studied, the ancient rishis studied the universe, they looked at ourselves and then considered ourselves at the micro level, and then expanded it to the macro level of the universe. So in the same way, the universe is born just as we are born, but the universe must also have existed in a pre-unmanifested condition from which it must have come, just like the oak tree comes from that. If you like, the intention from which matter originates. So that's, birth is actually the second stage of growth, and then we have growth. Imagine our own lives, what happens then? You have growth, you go from a baby, you go through to an adult 18 or 21-year-old, right? Then we have a transformation. We go from a young adult to an older adult. We transform in that way. And then we age, we decay. The final one is death. So everything that you see around you goes through these cycles, the 6 cycles of growth. And therefore, everything is regarded as transient. Right? Everything comes from an unmanifested form, is born, it grows, it transforms, it decays, and it dies. Everything that we know of does that, except consciousness. Because something that is infinite cannot have a birth. If something is all there is cannot have a death, because where would it go? You can't find a corner of infinity to say, look, in this part you're alive, and then consciousness, when you're no more, you can go into this part, right? If consciousness is all there is, it has no birth, so it's considered birthless. That's what makes it so tricky, because everything we know is transient. Everything we understand until we're told otherwise is transient. It goes through these 6 stages of growth. And that's what makes this so very, very difficult to understand. All right. It is the simplest message of all, is to say that consciousness is infinite, is without change, and is the basis of who you are, not only who you are, but of everything else. Now, when the ancient rishis started to think about all of this, they didn't think about it in the way that you and I think about it. If you have the wisdom of the Vedas, and I said yesterday that the Vedas effectively are a manual for human beings. We're the product, and the manufacturer decided that we needed a manual. And the manual are the Vedas. In studying the Vedas, you realize that there's no discrepancy. There's nothing that talks in one part against something that is in another. It's actually incredibly logical. That's what appealed to me when I first studied it, because I'm an applied engineer. I'm a computer scientist. Logic was very important to me. And this flawlessness in the Vedas comes from the fact that the Vedas are not authored. Anything that comes from a flawed individual mind has a flaw in it. So the ancient rishis didn't actually write down, they didn't compose, they didn't author this, the wisdom of the Vedas. It came to them. How did it come to them? This knowledge is all around. What they were fine enough, sattvic enough, to be able to receive it, just like a TV aerial or a radio aerial is tuned into the right frequency to be able to receive this wisdom. They then relayed it to others. Eventually, it was written down when language became available. Written language became available, and it's come down through the parampara tradition ever since to us. If you think about, if you have an operating manual for the human being, what would you put in it? You know, if this is the correct way to operate this product. First of all, you have all the things, you know, don't operate in the rain, don't plug it in, and so it might kill you. You know, electric shock. There's all these dangers. What would you write in a manual? If you were to write a manual today, what would you write in a manual for human beings? You think, it must be impossible. There's billions of us, and we all act differently. You can't possibly put us down into a manual and say, this is how to operate this wonderful product that we've just created. It must be absolutely impossible. And they said no, right? We can give you the basic guidelines, the things that you should follow as a human being. It's interesting, right? And these are the tasks that you must follow, and it came down to 4. You can describe the whole of your path, what the path you should be going down, in 4 things, and these are known as the Purusharthas. First one is Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. You've heard of these, especially Moksha. Everybody's heard of Moksha. No idea what it means, but it's a good word, isn't it? It's like karma is a good word. I use karma a lot, but I have no idea what it really means. But it's like guru as well, you know. It's a really nice word. I can put it into an after dinner conversation and it makes me sound really good, really spiritual, you know. But dharma, it has many translations. But let's use the translation that says it's the path of least harm, right? It's your ethical way of being is dharma. So first and foremost, in anything that you do, anything that this human body must do, it must do in an ethical manner. Right? We understand ethics. You don't have to be a philosopher to understand ethics. Ethics are inbuilt into us. Right? Don't harm others. Don't do things to others that you don't like done to you. Don't lie to others. Don't hit others. Don't cheat others. We don't have to learn these things. You don't have to go to school to learn these things. These are basic fundamental ethics. Dharma is therefore your starting point for a good life. Then comes Artha. Artha is security. Security in all things. Basically in wealth, in status, in a position where you're able to support yourself and those that are dependent upon you. You might think that's very odd. You have a great spiritual work here that says go and earn money. All right? It's good. It's good to earn money. Go and earn money so that you can look after yourself. You can feed and clothe yourself and shelter yourself. And do the same for those that are dependent upon you. Artha is one of the goals in life, of human life. The second goal. The third is Kama. Kama is enjoyment. The Vedas are saying, go out and enjoy yourself. It's your duty to go out and enjoy yourself, fulfill your desires. Because it's your desires that will drive your actions. So you don't need to sit in a Himalayan cave and say, I have no more desires, all right? Because the Vedas say that should be one of your human pursuits, is to fulfill your desires. But what it says is that Artha and Kama, the two middle ones, are actions. And Dharma, the first one, which was an ethical well-being, that now becomes an adjective. So earn money, do whatever you need to do for security, but do it in a dharmic way. Do it in an ethical manner. Desire whatever you want and achieve your goals, but do it in an ethical manner. So the ethics comes first. That is your grounding, and you're being told to do these things in order to have the life. Why? In order to have the life so that you can achieve number 4, which is moksha. It's a simple manual. It hasn't got many pages, all right? There's only 4 things in this manual. It says dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Now the thing is that artha and kama are under your control. Whether you go out to work, whether you look after a little one, whether you look after your parents, whatever you do in order to make people's lives easy and comfortable, is up to you, right? It's your will that drives it. Your will drive those actions, and you can perform those actions. Also, for karma, for desires, that is your will coming up, that is your desire coming up. You perform action, and you do it all ethically. So what is moksha? Moksha, the final goal in life, is to attain liberation. Liberation from what? Liberation from the ups and downs of life. The samsara of the daily life, the happiness one moment and the unhappiness the next. All the conflict in your mind. You are to attain liberation from that. Be free of samsara is moksha. Right. Now, what action can you possibly do to get liberation? You can say, yeah, I want a bit of that, Ram. I want permanent happiness. Just give me a few instructions, maybe 3 or 4 things that I can easily remember, and I'll do them every day, and I want permanent happiness. It's not going to happen. There's nothing that you can do that achieves permanent happiness, because you are living in a transient world. If you're living in a transient world, the things around you are going through the 6 growth cycles, as you are, and you're interacting with it. Which means that every object that you know will either end, either you will be separated from it, or it will be separated from you. It will come to an end. You may come to an end before it comes to an end, all right? It will either be separated from you, or you will be separated from it. If you depend your happiness on any external object, it will either end before you do, or you will end before it does. When you rely on an external object for your happiness, and it comes to an end, or it comes to a change, right, then you will become unhappy when it changes. If you're attached to sunshine, you'll become unhappy when it rains. Right? The moment you become unhappy, you've stopped the cycle of being permanently happy. There is nothing that you can attach to in the real world for your happiness, because every item in the real world is transient. So how do you achieve moksha? How do you achieve moksha in a world where everything is transient? And you achieve moksha not by an action, but by an understanding. Moksha is not achieved through an action where you go from here, this is non-moksha, and I go to there, and thus moksha is not going to happen. There is no action that you can perform that will guarantee permanent happiness. The only way to get to moksha is to understand who you are. Because once you understand your true reality, your underlying reality as one of being an unchanging, a changeless source that is immortal, right? Infinite in its power, infinite in its size, is who you really are. Only at that stage will you be able to detach from the incidentals of life that are the objects. So the only way to achieve moksha is through knowledge. And this becomes very difficult. Why is it difficult? As I said yesterday, which nobody will remember. But there's 6 ways that we acquire knowledge. All right? But knowledge about the self is very difficult, because when we acquire knowledge, we acquire knowledge of objects. You think about it. Any study, any subject that you have studied has been a study of something, and you've been the studier. You learn to drive, you learn to read, you do geography, you do physics, you do a mathematical equation. Anything that you come to know, you have come to know an object, and you have become the knower. All right? Now you want to study who the knower is. In order to study who the knower is, using our basic mechanisms of study, we have to make the knower an object. And the knower is never an object, is always the subject. How do you study something that is always the studier? You can't study any aspect of who you are, because you're the one that's studying it. You cannot make the subject an object and say, I want to know how big consciousness is, let's measure it. This is why science stops. Science is basically a study of objects. It measures objects using our 5 senses. And then it writes it down so it's repeatable. And we call that science. Where science stops, it never asks the question, who is measuring? It never asks the question, who is looking at the scale to say, this is 3.92 meters long, or this weighs this much, or this is this color, or it tastes in this way. It stops at that point. That's why a study of consciousness is useless. You cannot study consciousness because you can't become an object. You say, well, I wasted my time coming to this festival then, haven't I? So how do you study something that is non-studyable? And you need now a means of knowing. The Vedas, especially Vedanta, the Upanishads within Vedanta, are your means of knowing. Means of knowing that which cannot be studied in any other way. All right. Difficult this. Because what you're trying to do is look at a picture and you're imagining, what does the camera look like? There's no way for you to study the camera from the picture. Yes, you know for sure, because you're looking at the picture, there is a camera. What does the camera look like? Right? So now you have to come to an understanding that I see the picture. If the picture is this way, and Vedanta says it describes the picture, I know I can definitely see the picture, there must be a camera. Right? I come to understand cognitively that there must be something that is the knower for something to be known. It's a cognitive understanding. It's flipping the brain around to say there must be that by which I know these things. Otherwise, I will not know them, and I know that I definitely do know them. That by which your thoughts are known. Because you know your thoughts, there must be something by which your thoughts are known, and that must be the real me. We said yesterday that we tend to think of the little ego I as me because it's a reflected consciousness. We discussed how if there's if there's this consciousness within me that is that by which things are known, how come I don't know what you're thinking? You don't know what I'm thinking. Thank goodness. How is it that if we come from the one single source, how come we don't know each other's thoughts? It's because there's another mechanism. The mind is acting as a reflective medium, is taking the light of consciousness, and it's that reflected light that illumines the thoughts in our mind. It's like, as I said yesterday, a mirror being held to the window. You've got diffuse lighting in the room. A mirror being held next to the window reflects the sunlight, and on the wall you see a bright area that matches the shape of your mirror. And you think, that's bright. That must be the real light. What you don't see is behind the real light is also the diffuse light. You're looking at two types of light. One is the original diffused light, and one is the reflected light. And the reflected light is so strong that we think that that is the most important light. That is the I. But where did that reflection come from? Where did that reflected light come from? It came from the one sun which was powering the diffused lighting in the first place. There's only the one source, but because it appears in this strong reflective form in our minds, which is the reflective medium, that is what we call consciousness within our minds. And in turn, the mind reflects that within the body, and the body becomes illumined, and the body becomes sentient. Prana goes into the body, and the body functions. It is all borrowed light, right? It's not intrinsic. If you want to understand what intrinsic nature is, they use the definition of a pot, right? Pot of water with rice in it on the stove. The rice gets heated and gets cooked. Is the heat intrinsic to the rice? No. It borrowed it from the water, right? The water boiled, the rice cooked. Is heat intrinsic to the rice? No. How do we know? Because if we take the rice out, the heat will go away. Something that is intrinsic to it never leaves it. All right? Is heat intrinsic to the water? No. You take the pot to one side and the water will cool. Is heat intrinsic to the pot? No. You take the pot away from the stove and the pot will cool. It'll leave it. Is heat intrinsic to the fire? Yes. You cannot have a cold fire. All right? Once the fire is there, heat is there, it's intrinsic to it. That's how you understand something that is intrinsic. It never leaves it. It is not transient. As long as it is there, it is there. All right? So our intrinsic nature never leaves us. We see these other effects along the way. Right? We see ourselves in these different forms. I see myself as a father, as a husband, as a son. I am the same. Right? These are intrinsic roles. These are non-intrinsic roles that come and go. But I, the underlying nature, never changes. So once you come and you go full circle and you say, okay, and I'm going to hold this thought about consciousness being infinite, and the consciousness is that by which I know myself, and that consciousness is infinite. And I can even get this idea of trying to follow what that is, even though it's a subject that cannot be studied, because it cannot be objectified. What's the point? What's the point of knowing it? Is it going to help me? Is it going to go faster in my car tomorrow? What's the point of moksha? what's the point of knowing all of this? So what's the point? I mean, it's a nice place and all that, but why am I here on this carpet, listening to you, going on and on, all right? So moksha, what is it there for? Is liberation from samsara. If you understand yourself to be who you truly are, that is that immortal, unchanging, pure consciousness, then it doesn't matter that someone else says something to you in a nasty way, because their underlying nature is also that one consciousness. Your underlying nature and their underlying nature is one and the same. What is saying a nasty thing to you is their mind and their body, not who they are, not who they really are. Every tree that I cut down, their intrinsic nature is pure consciousness, the same as me. So when I cut down that tree, I harm myself. Right? It is their mind and body. Yes, all living things have a subtle body, and they reflect consciousness in that subtle body. A single microbe has a subtle body. It's a much weaker subtle body than ours, and therefore that the consciousness that they reflect is a weaker light, but that still gives them sentiency. There are things that don't have a subtle body. A stone doesn't have a subtle body. All right? Something that's entirely mineral has only a physical body. Therefore, there is no subtle body to reflect consciousness. Therefore, it is not sentient. It's not because consciousness is non-existent. If consciousness is infinite, consciousness is in the stone, it's the underlying nature of the stone as it is the underlying nature of us. There's a much bigger discussion about physical reality, why it is the way it is, and how come its fundamental nature is consciousness. And all I can say is that this is not the time for it. I have written it down in a little simple, Vedanta for Dummies, a very thin book, which you can purchase later after this talk, and that has a section on it, why all of this reality underlying is consciousness. But when you come to this realization, then you have analyzed the situation. Remember what the other gurus have said? That there's 3 ways that you acquire the knowledge. If you've been listening to the others, who are much better at this than me, but if you've listened to the others, remember, the first stage to acquiring knowledge is Shravana. It's listening intently. The most difficult there is, right? Because when you listen to something, you analyze it while you listen. When you analyze something according to what you already know. You can't possibly analyze something if you didn't know anything about it. All right? Or you had no basis from which to perform your analysis. So when you hear new information and you say, that doesn't sound right, what are you basing that opinion on? Something that you already know. Okay? If you're basing your opinion on a new subject matter based on what you already know and you reject it, means that you will never be able to learn anything new. Because your opinion on what you already know says this can't be true. So Shravana says, take your ego and park it beside you on a nice little pretty mat and say, for the duration of this, I've come to this place, and because Ram has chosen this teacher, I'm going to assume that this teacher is pretty good. I'm going to listen to this person, and then it is the information that comes over is subject to future verification. So listen to everything, you don't believe it. Vedanta is not about belief. Belief has to be preached, right? Vedanta is about knowledge. Knowledge has to be taught and simulated within us. This is not about belief, okay? So if we then say, Shravana, listen intently. How intently should one listen? One should listen intently enough so that you can paraphrase it back. So there's a test after this class. You must listen intently enough to be able to paraphrase it back. That means that you have understood what has been said in the words that have been conveyed. All right. The next stage is manana. You take that knowledge and you turn it, or take that information and turn it into knowledge. You process it. You ask all the questions. And that's why this tradition is all about asking questions, question after question after question, until your doubts are removed. Until you know this information to be knowledge for you. All right? And at that stage, most people say, well, I understand what you say, it's intellectual knowledge. I've got news for you. You haven't got any other type of knowledge. All knowledge is intellectual knowledge. Because the intellect is the only instrument we have with which we process information. So it is always intellectual knowledge, right? The thing is that intellectual knowledge requires a mind that processes it. And most of the actions we perform are instinctive. When somebody says something to you, your pain body rises and you yak back, all right? You didn't think about it. If you thought about it later, you say, I could have been less aggressive in my response, right? The knowledge that you've learned can come through later, but it's often too late. So you need the third stage, where you need to imbibe the knowledge into all of you. So when you have an instinctive response to some input, that response is instinctively based on the knowledge that you've acquired, and not your raw, basic instinct. Right? And that third stage is called Nitidhyasana. The Vedas, which is a manual for life, the first part of the Vedas cover all the ritual areas that are associated with all of the actions that you can perform in order to increase your material wealth, be it in family, be it in wealth, status, whatever. There's a ritual for it. Then there's a meditation technique. The meditation section is for you to, when you've come to the realization that however much I have, am, or are, I'm still not happy, there must be more, then meditation allows you to vacate the mind of the thoughts that occupy it all the time, so that you create the space for wisdom, for the knowledge to come in. You subdue the ego sufficiently for the knowledge to come in into the space that you've created. First stage of meditation. Then comes the knowledge through teachings such as this. And you acquire the knowledge through Shravana Manana. Right. And then you go to the second part of meditation, where you meditate upon the knowledge that you've acquired, that you've validated. Remember, subject to future verification. You have verified it. Now you want to make it your own. The second stage of meditation is actually meditating not on a blank mind. You're not trying to create space now. You're trying to reiterate the knowledge that you've acquired. So you choose a subject area that you've acquired knowledge in, and you think around that area in your mind, and only in that area, because you've now trained your mind through the first stage of meditation to be able to focus on anything you like. Now the second stage of meditation, you focus on the things that you've learned. And as you focus on it, as you give it more and more strength, it becomes more powerful. It starts to go down into every cell of your body. Now you start to live the knowledge through this second stage of meditation. And you, not only is it an intellectual knowledge that you understand perfectly, because you've validated it, you've asked all the questions, you have no more doubt about the information that's come in. But now you've started to instill it into every cell of your body, so that when you live and you have an instinctive response to some criteria that's coming in, that response is a wise response based on that wisdom. If you can create that wise response based on the wisdom and not in your old self, that raw self, pre-programmed self that you were as a result of life's conditioning, if your response can be from that wise based, you have come to realize the wisdom. You are self-realized. You are enlightened. Enlightenment is available to everyone. You don't have to be pretty or even female, right? It's available to everyone at any age. Is coming to the realization of getting that knowledge within you and living through that knowledge. Now, how does that change you? And it doesn't change you at all. You are still the same self. You still look at the mirror and say, oh my God, is that how my cheeks look? All right? It doesn't change you one single iota. Right? Your hair still falls out tomorrow. All right? It still happens in the same way, because that is the physical world. That's the physical reality. That's the transactional world that you live in. But the knowledge comes from within, that the things that you're transacting with is you. How do I now want to treat myself? And I go back to Dharma, through ethics. The path of least harm. When you walk across the grass, there are blades of grass that are going to crack. And the cracked grass will eventually die. All right? So unless you've learned to hover, you are going to harm the grass that you walk on. All right? But it's the path of least harm, because if there was a bird struggling on the ground, you wouldn't step on it. All right? So the path of least harm is what you want with ethics. And so an enlightened person lives a life full of ethics, because that is now their nature. They've gone through the Purusharthas, the first phases. They've come to realize who they are, and they live entirely in an ethical manner. It doesn't mean that they don't perform actions. They still go to the bathroom. All right? When you're enlightened, it doesn't mean that you stop getting up in the morning and you're desperate to go. It doesn't happen that way, because you're still in the body. It's how you're thinking that changes. How you react to the world that changes. You know, it's often asked that these great sages, they often died, you know, Ramana died of a huge tumor, a cancer. If they're so wise, if they're so knowledgeable, then how come they couldn't just make the cancer go away? Because they realized who they really were, and that they were playing this role through their mind and body, and it was the body that was going through the 6 stages of growth. And the cancer was going through the 6 stages of growth. Right? They realize that this is a world, this is an object like a blade of grass or a leaf on a tree. It too must have its time. And they were okay with it. They knew that they were immortal. It didn't matter that this body comes and goes. It's not the death of who I am. Because if I'm infinite, there's no place that I cannot be. And therefore, I don't come to an end. You say, oh, that's brilliant, Ram. That means that I'm not going to die. That's taken the first greatest fear away from me, because our greatest fear is that we're going to die. All right? And what the enlightened soul understands is that my body is going to die, I am not. Right? And once you can separate that out, that if necessary you can come back and live again through another body, because you never die, then the fear of death leaves you. Since death is the greatest fear we have, every other fear is subservient to death. Imagine the happiness that comes when the fear of death disappears. If this is the largest, and you can tackle the fear of death, you've tackled everything, every other trauma that comes in life. If you've tackled every other trauma that comes in life, you have no unhappiness. Right? Because that's what brings happiness upon us. Because you're no longer reliant on the outside. You understand that this is an objective world. It's not you. You are no longer dependent on an external situation, person, or thing. You don't lean on anything else, because you are the everything that there is. And once you come to that realization and the fear goes away, the samsara goes away with it. And fear is the opposite of love. And when that fear goes away, that happiness that stays is permanent. Moksha is not achieved through an action, but achieved through knowledge. That knowledge can only be taught. Don't think that you can sit in meditation and have all the light glowing around you and you're in this wonderful orange or golden bubble and the blue streaks of light come from the right to the left and you've achieved it all. That's an experience. That's a mystical experience. You are the experiencer. Knowledge has to be taught. If you don't have it, you won't acquire it through this mystical way. It has to be taught to you. If you're going to overcome samsara, if you're going to get to moksha, you have to learn how. And that's why the guru-teacher relationship is important. Because this is passed on by one who knows, the one who lives it, the one who enlightens, then teaches people, the ones who want to know. And in the Bhagavad Gita it says, only 1 in 1,000 will seek. And only 1 in 1,000 seekers will come to know. Alright? You are all in the 1 in 1,000. There's another 999 of you that are not at the festival. Alright? Because they're not seekers, they're not interested. It is not their time to know. But you've started seeking, and of the seekers, 1 in 1,000 seekers will come to know. What is come to know is become enlightened. And you can't ask a person, are you enlightened? And when were you enlightened? And he says, October the 21st. You know, it doesn't happen that way. You come to a realization of who you are, and people won't say, I'm enlightened, but other people will come up to them and say, I don't understand where you get your calmness. Right? I don't understand how a situation comes upon you, And you can first of all say, what? And then you can say, so what? Right? It is a situation. A situation has 6 stages of growth. It is transient. It will also die. Everything changes. Except you, the eternal witness, the observer. Situations will come. You'll need to modify it. You'll need to deal with it because you're in the transient world. You're not dependent on it, and therefore it will not affect you. That state of calmness is infectious. And that's what this festival really does. You start to achieve little or a lot of that knowledge, and you go out, and the people you interact with, they can detect that within you. And it becomes infectious. They want a little bit of it. And your calmness in handling a situation, which will surely come in life, because life is full of transient things, the way you handle it will teach others. And you yourself, therefore, will become teachers as you pass this knowledge on. And they will grow in their path. And ultimately, they will become a seeker. And they say, I want to know more about this. I want to know more of where you learnt this. Can you please show me? And a moment that a seeker wants to know, a teacher will appear. This festival is here because it needed to be done. Right? This festival is here because you all wanted to know. That's the way it happens. But it happens for very few. That's why we haven't got the whole of Reading in here. Thank goodness. Right? It only happens to the few. And it is so wonderful when it happens. But remember, this, you may feel very pleasant hearing some of these talks and warm glow and all of this thing, and you leave it and you go back to your world and your partner hasn't made you dinner, or the dogs just weed in front the front porch, and suddenly all of it vacates you and it's like you're back to normal, right? But you can live it every moment. When you wash your hands for that 20 seconds, you can focus on the water, right? And you say the underlying nature of the water is the underlying nature of me, right? Welcome water onto my hands, and you've just done a 20-second meditation. You can get back to it all. You can reconnect with everything that is around you. You don't need to come here. And the best that we can do is that after hearing these people and coming to that stage, you don't need to come here. Vedanta's most powerful state is that this means of knowing, once it's known, once you have achieved a state of moksha within you, Vedanta is no longer required. It's like you read a book over and over again, you fully understand it, right? The book is no longer required. Advaita Vedanta is a means of knowing the self. It is not the knowledge itself. The knowledge comes within you, is realized within you cognitively, that I am that by which all is known is within me, is not out there. Therefore, I am all there is. That's the state of enlightenment. It is achievable by everyone. It's achievable in lifetime. That's Jivan Mukti. Moksha, liberation while alive. Jivan Mukti. Most religions tell you liberation when dead. All right? Advaita Vedanta says you can be liberated while alive because there is nowhere to go to. There is no heaven to go to. The reason that heaven is within you is because if the infinite is all there is, the infinite must already be here. I can't move to it. The only reason I don't know that I'm fully liberated is because there is a dark curtain of ignorance that's hiding that truth from us. And that ignorance can only be removed by knowledge. It cannot be removed by action. That's why Advaita Vedanta is taught in classes such as this and the great speakers that we've got at the festival. Right, before my voice totally goes, are there any questions? Yes. Very, very good question. So when you do achieve this knowledge, it's said that you become dispassionate. Now, dispassionate doesn't mean that you no longer care about the world or you have no compassion. It means that you are no longer affected by it. And if you're not affected by the world, then your task becomes one of trying to help the world achieve the same state that you're in. So when people come to this understanding, they have no reason to harm the world, harm other people. So their entire life is dedicated towards how can I help another person get to the state of permanent happiness that I am in. So such people don't think about retracting themselves from the world. Many of these people do so because they have no family, they don't need to transact with the world. But you can safely stay a member of a household and say, how can I now help? And this help is extremely important because there's a lot of others who don't know. But what you don't do is you don't thrust this thing down people's throats. And there's a middle stage of people who know a little. You know, they say knowing nothing is great, knowing everything is great, knowing a little bit is a different. It's like the barber, you know, with the cutthroat razor. He sees a wart on the back of your neck and he says, I can remove that really easily. Would you like me to remove it? All right? He's in total ignorance about physiology and germs and things like that. And he's done hundreds of these wart removals and people are very pleased and they disappear. But somebody says, you know, you do so many of these, you should really understand a little bit about, you know, biology and biochemistry and germs and things like this. And he reads the book and he says, oh my God. And somebody comes in on the wart and said, my friend said you removed his wart really beautifully. He said, no, I can't do it. Because this and this and this may happen, right? A little knowledge is a very bad thing. Now, if he was a fully qualified doctor, he would be able to do something about it. But so don't take this little knowledge for others. Don't try and teach other people through words and try and do it. If you're going to pass this on, be so through example. When other people are panicking, all right? You are the one that's calm. It's not because you don't care. It's because you understand that the panic is transient. Right? I say to people, would you like to worry or would you like to solve the problem? If you'd like to worry, then I can give you 6 more. I've got really nice ones that you can worry about. Or would you like to spend the time and the energy in trying to solve the problem that's in front of you? So be that way. Be the solver of other people's problems. All right? Rather than be the warrior about other people's problems. They will come and they will go. Some of it will be sad. All right? just before I got on stage, I got a WhatsApp picture of my niece in a hospital in southern India undergoing cancer treatment. She's only 21. Right? These things will come, and you'll be compassionate about them. You'll send them your love, but at the same time, you'll be detached from that result. Do whatever you can to improve the state of the situation, but don't be affected by it. You are bigger than that. You are all there is. Everything else is transient. Have that state of mind, and you too can be liberated whilst alive. Jivan Mukti. Next question. Yes.
Early on, you were talking about subject and object.
Yeah.
And about science. And what I'm interested in is with contemplation of quantum physics, are scientists moving into a new realm? Because when you observe, the observer influences the outcome, and they've got to realize that this subject object
Is connected, and the best one, as you know, is the twin slit experiment on this one. So basically, you know, and look it up on YouTube. There's plenty of videos, and there's even cartoons that explain it beautifully. It's a two slit experiment where they realized that the action that was being performed changed if there was an observer, and that light has two forms, as a wave and as a particle, and it changes between the two. And I read a beautiful article the other day which said, and scientists don't know, and how it changes, and that something, how can something be both a particle and a waveform, right, at the same time? It's you know, they don't really understand it, but it's there, it's in evidence, it's in the mathematics, so it's there. And somebody said that maybe the waveform is a subtle body of the particle. So everything must have a physical body and may have a subtle body. What if the waveform was a subtle body of the particle, and it just moved between the two, and what we can observe one, we can observe the other. See, we cannot measure things in the subtle body. A scientist can't say where in your mind is a picture of your dog. All right? It's immeasurable. That's why it's called a subtle body. It's not perceptible to our five senses. So in the same way, what science does, science is observational, is objective. It measures, it repeats. It never asks who is doing the measuring. Right? And therefore science can never solve the problem of consciousness. Right? It cannot be studied because it is not an object. And we don't know how to study an object. How to study anything but an object. Science doesn't know this. And that's why Vedanta had to come in. That's why the Vedas had to come in as a means of knowing, means of understanding the subject. It's completely different to any other type of knowledge base that we have. And so, yes, science is there, we transact with it, we interact with it, but actually everything ultimately disappears into the one. I'll give you a synopsis, right? The shirt I wear. By the way, I've got a funny story about the shirt. In the last 3 years, every video of me has been with the same shirt. And everybody thinks I've only got the one shirt of that color. But that's not true. I have more than one copy. It's my favorite shirt, and I have more than one of those shirts. But every single video. So before this festival, my wife sat me down and said, "You're going to order 4 shirts, and I don't want to see that original shirt in any other video." And I've ordered 4 shirts, and they're the same design, but they are different in color. And the other day we were recognized in Costco. My wife and I were shopping to get the volunteer bits and pieces and biscuits and things like this in Costco. I mean, this is a big team, you understand. So we were there shopping in Costco, and we were recognized by somebody who recognized my voice, didn't recognize me, recognized my voice, and said, "Aren't you the organizer of the festival?" We said, we had to say, yes we are. And she was so excited, she wanted to take a picture. And she took a picture of us. She said, "I'm going to tweet this." And I was wearing the same shirt. So this shirt that I wear, all right, is obviously is a shirt, otherwise you get to see the not so pleasant parts of me, all right? So this obviously is a shirt, but what is the, what do we call the effect? What is the underlying nature of this shirt? It is cloth, right? It's the cloth that's been manufactured into the form of a shirt. If I took this shirt and cut it up, I could make it up into little handkerchiefs, all right? And where did the shirt go? If I cut it up, where did the shirt go? In fact, you could say this shirt has a weight. Say it's 100 grams. And I could tell you, I could ask you, what's the weight of the cloth? You say it's 100 grams. So I said, okay, if the cloth weighs 100 grams and the shirt is made out of cloth and it weighs 100 grams, what's the weight of the shirt? And you have to come to the conclusion, the shirt has no weight. Something that has no weight, is it material? Material meaning is that matter. So, well, no, it's a shirt that's been conjured up. It's the cloth that's been conjured up into a shirt. So all we're seeing here is cloth in a new form. That's a shirt. And then you go to the cloth. You say, what's the weight of the cloth, and what's the weight of the fibers? And you say, well, the fibers are actually 100 grams. And what's the cloth? The cloth is a form of the fibers. Right? And you go down. What's the weight of the structures, the molecules that are within the fibers? You say 100 grams. Do the fibers exist? Well, I clearly see them, but they're the underlying. Then you go down to the atoms, all right? And the subatomic particles that make up the atoms. You take every single item here, and what you're seeing is a form, and you give a name to the form so that you know what's happening. But physics tells us this floor is 99.79% space. And I'm sitting on it, it's supporting my weight. It's doing a good job, all right? But it's mostly space. And you go down to the molecular structure, the atomic structure, the energy structure underneath that. And you ask yourself, is that it? Where did that energy come from? And you go back, when you have a causeless cause, when you're no longer looking at an effect, there is one underlying cause right at the end. That underlying cause in Advaita Vedanta is called Brahman. That Brahman, when from the perspective of the individual, is called Atman, and that Atman is the pure consciousness. That is the basis of all the material things that you see, because it must have, there can be no effect without a cause. Vedanta is very clear on this. You can't just say, I created it, right? What did you create it out of? Who gave you the knowledge to create it? Where did the knowledge come from? Right? Where did the tools come from? There is no effect without a cause. The ultimate cause is Brahman, is pure consciousness from which all derives. That's also in the book. I'm just plugging the book at this stage. Next question. Oh, somebody's got a book. Oh, there you go. Well, the proceeds from it go to the charity, so it's okay. You're doing a good cause. Another question.
I just started studying the Vedanta, and I've previously been working in a Zen practice.
Right.
So, looking at when you said that the veil of ignorance can only be removed by knowledge and not by action. How do you, I mean, what exactly do you mean by knowledge? Because how do we get beyond the belief system? And would you say meditation is an action? And in that all truths lead to an absolute truth. Is the path of Vedanta, does it have parallels with other truths leading to this ultimate?
It does have parallels if you go far back enough, right? But what happens with all truths that get converted ultimately to religion is that human minds go in and adulterate the truth and make rules. When you have the truth with rules, we call it religion. All right? So if you Advaita Vedanta therefore is not a religion, it's a finding out of that truth. It's the means of knowing that ultimate truth. And therefore, the reason that I said, and the question was, the reason that I said that ignorance can only go away with knowledge rather than with an action, because you cannot perform anything in order to eradicate that ignorance. If you think about it, they say ignorance has no beginning, but it has an end. When does it have an end? When it's been eradicated through the injection of knowledge. Knowledge has a beginning, but no end. Because when you come to know something and the ignorance has disappeared, you will always come to know. Therefore, if you are ignorant about your true self, it had no beginning, but it will have an end. Maybe not in this lifetime, but it will have an end. And when it does have an end, you will come to know. You will come to realize your true nature. And all of us are on this journey, at various stages of this journey. That's why we have these multiple tents. For people to be at different stages of their journey. And if they take, by coming here, they take one more step to say, it looks as if my next step is going to be in the fire tent. Then they walk over from the air tent and they sneak in and they sit outside the fire tent thinking, I wonder what they're rattling about in there. All right? That's what this is designed for. You're taking your own personal journey to that truth. That truth is the same, whatever focus it's given, whatever path, whatever name it's given. It's like, I think it was said before yesterday, it's the mountaintop. But imagine, I have a more interesting, imagine that the mountain is a jelly mountain. Mountain of jelly. I know it's not very nice, but anyway, but the jelly has another thing. Anyway, you pour boiling water on top of the mountain of jelly. You've got a cone of jelly, you've made yourself a little mountain. You pour boiling water on top. What will happen? The water will run down the sides, okay? And because it's boiling water, it'll melt the jelly wherever it goes down. And after a while, what you'll find is that little gullies have been created down the mountain. And when you pour more water, it'll go down the gullies rather than the other sections. All of those gullies are paths to the one truth. It doesn't matter what your journey has been. It is always the path to the one truth. Where did the water come from? Right? What is the top of this mountain? That's why we don't have 185,000 people here or 200,000 people here, is because the closer you get to the top of the mountain, the smaller number of people you encounter. There's lots of people at the base, right? But as you go up the steps of the wisdom traditions, you get to a smaller and smaller community, smaller and smaller number of people who want to know. And that is all of you. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. You are on your path, right? Our job is to create that environment by which you can run a little bit further. We supply the water bottle so that you can carry on running your marathon, right? We're not there to power your legs or power your desire to keep on running. That's not our function. That's not our capability. Ours is to create the environment by which you can proceed on your journey. Because that's been determined to you through your past actions. You know the doctrine of karma. How many people here understand the doctrine of karma? All right. Doctrine of karma says that you are here not by a divine that says you'll be bright, you'll be dumb, you'll be tall, you'll be short, you'll be black, you'll be white, you'll be brown. It's not determined by somebody on top pointing a finger. You are who you are in order to exhaust the karmic results with which you are born. Right? These karmic results are called sanchita karma. Sorry, prarabdha karma. Prarabdha karma is the karmic results with which you were born. I'll explain where it comes from in a moment. So you were born with that, and the moment of your birth is like an arrow comes from the bow and starts its flight. That arrow will carry on flying as long as your prarabdha karma exists for you to exhaust it. Your body, your situation, your status, your intellect, your looks, everything has been designed by you in order to exhaust the prarabdha karma with which you were born. What is prarabdha karma? As we said, every cause has an effect. Every action has a result. Result that is either executed immediately or executed in another time. You cannot stop the consequences of your action. Every action has a consequence. If you hit somebody, you get hit back. That's an immediate result. The consequence was immediate, all right? The more long-term consequences might be the bent nose, all right? Every action has a consequence. When we perform an action during our lifetime, as a result of our willpower, every action has a consequence. So the action is called karma, and the consequence is called karma phalam. Phalam means fruit, the fruit of the actions, karma phalam. In our lifetime, that we perform actions as a result of our will, being able to determine right from wrong, act in a dharmic way or not, is all under our control. We perform actions, we accumulate the karmic results, the karma phalam. The karma phalam of this lifetime is called agami karma. These are the consequences we acquire in this lifetime. And we carry on acquiring them. Some of them we exhaust during this lifetime. The immediate consequences are exhausted within the lifetime. Some of them are still there when we die. Okay? What happens to it? It doesn't get wasted. It's like money in your pocket, all right? It gets banked. So the agami karma that has not been exhausted during your lifetime gets banked against your name, right, in the universe, and that at that time is called sanchita karma. So that's your karmic phalam bank, and it's got a huge store because you've performed all these actions in this and past lives, right? And then you decide what's the withdrawal I'm going to make today? And you make a withdrawal, that's the prarabdha karma with which you start another life. So the life that you're in is predetermined by you. All right? You've got no one else to blame. And the life that you're going to get in the future is predetermined by you, because every consequence can have a beneficial effect or a non-beneficial effect. There's no point in saying good or bad. Right? A beneficial or a non-beneficial consequence. These are also stacked. So if you come as a footballer's wife, there was a lot of beneficial prarabdha karma that you brought in with you. All right? Maybe not. I know. But if you're a footballer, boy, you know. So you determine that, and you stay within this cycle as long as you feel that you are the doer. Because karma is action. Action is performed by the person who does, the doer. The karmic results belong to the person who does the action. As long as you believe that you are the doer, you, the mind and the body who perform the action, are the doer. As long as you believe that, those karmic results will cling to you, because you believe that you are the doer. And they will never exhaust. And you will, the agami will become the sanchita, you'll make a withdrawal and you come again in this another life in order to exhaust the prarabdha karma with which you were born. The moment that you come to understand, you are not the doer, but you are that by which the doing is known, you dissociate between your true self and the performer of the karma. Those consequences then no longer belong to you. You are not affected by it in another life. All right? Self-realization is that separation between my true self rather than the mind and body that acts, that performs these actions. You've now dissociated from the karmic results, and therefore you're no longer subject to rebirth. Another whole subject, right? Another class that we don't have time for. Even though it's going to get sunnier next week, this tent is going to disappear tomorrow. So we'll hold that off for next year maybe. But the idea is that that dissociation between the doer and the ultimate self allows you to have no more births. Quick question. I've only got 1 minute. Sorry, behind you, sorry. She raised, yeah.
So if the law of liberation, surely consciousness would not exist as it currently exists, right? Surely this play of Beale would not continue.
This is the big question. It's like saying, but yes, you see, the question is, how can you have repeated rebirths when consciousness is all there is? I mean, you can't have it both ways, Ram. You can't be individuals and you can't be the whole. But the individual is just another way of looking at the whole. So, do you consider yourself to be the wave or the ocean? If you consider yourself to be the wave, even though you crash against the shore, the wind will build up and another wave will start. Right? If you consider yourself the water, you are always the water. And you never be anything other than the water, even if sometimes that water appears as waves. So it's another way of looking at it. Once you realize you're water, then you can enjoy being the wave. That's what life is about, is to enjoy being the self, but knowing who you really are. Thank you very much indeed.